Hello, Math 140 students. This is your instructor, Cindy Enrique, and we will be going over our last chapter of the semester. Woohoo! You guys have made it almost to the end. I'm so proud of each and every one of you. Congratulations on making it this far. So let's go ahead and wrap up chapter 12. We'll go ahead and start with circles, which is found in section 12.1. So we have the equation of the circle in standard form. Where we have in parentheses x minus h squared plus in parentheses y minus k squared is equal to the radius squared, okay? Remember, h and k would be the center of the circle and r is the radius. The radius, as you can see from the picture on the right, it's anywhere from the center of the circle to an edge. If I went all the way across, and that would be the diameter, but for the purposes of this section, we're only going to be focusing on the radius, okay? So let's put this into play. For example number 1, it says find the center and radius of the circle, then graph the circle. So looking at my formula above, I know that I have x minus h squared plus my y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. So if I were to rewrite that, then, or to actually identify my variables, I see that my h is equal to a positive 3 and that my y is going to equal to a negative 4. And it looks like here, if I'm thinking about my radius, oops, and I said y, didn't I? I meant to say my k value. My k value, there we go, is a negative 4. So I have now identified my h and k value, and that radius, well, I know that I have radius squared is equal to 36. So if I were to square root both sides, I get that my radius is equal to 6. And here we don't do the plus or minus because we're talking about radius, which is a measurement, and that can only be positive. So I'm going to say that my center is my h and my k value. So the h value that I got was 3, and my k value that I got was negative 4. And I also know that my radius was equal to 6. So that is how I get my center and my radius. Now I'm going to graph this. So first I start with making the dot or the ordered pair at the center. So I'm at positive 3, negative 4. So that is my center at positive 3, negative 4. Now my radius tells me to go 6 in every direction. So I'm going to go up 6. From the center. I'm also going to go down 6 from the center. I'm also going to go right 6 from the center. I'm going to go left 6 from the center. So that's kind of like the corners of my circle. And of course a circle is round, so you don't really have any corners. So you just try your best to make kind of the circular motion as you can. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do that. And while it's not perfect, at least you get the idea. That is going to be my circle for the center 3, negative 4, and my radius 6. Okay. So again, I'm going to deal with that familiar formula that we had before. And if you just keep rewriting the standard form of a circle, eventually you guys will memorize it. So notice here that the x doesn't really have anything that's being minusing or subtracting. So what we can do is we can say that it's x minus 0 squared plus my y plus 3 squared is equal to my 3 squared. And the reason I do this is that now I can clearly see what my h and my k value is. I can see that my h value is 0 and that my k value is going to be negative 3. And I also find that my radius is going to be equal to a positive 3. So I know that my center is 0, negative 3. And I also have that my radius is a positive 3. So now that I've identified my center and my radius, I can go ahead and graph this circle as well. So my center here is at 0, negative 3. So there is my center. And my radius tells me to go 3 up, down, left, and right. So here's 3 up from the center, 3 down from the center, 3 right from the center, and 3 left from the center. So my circle, remember, circles do not have edges or corners, but this is kind of your outline. You want to make sure that your circle kind of hits all of those dots. Okay, now for example number 3, this is not in standard form, okay? So in order to get into standard form, what we're going to do is we are going to use completing the square. And I will review it as we go. So first thing that we want to do is group our x's together. So here I have my x squared and my positive 2x. So I'm going to go ahead and write that. So I have my x squared plus my 2x. The next thing I want to think about are my y's. So here are my y values. So I have a positive y squared and a negative 16y. And I have this all plus 61 equal to 0. And just to remind us, the standard form of a circle, we have the x minus h squared plus my y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. So this is the goal and how to rewrite it in standard form. So I'm going to have to do the completing the square here. So hopefully you remember with completing the square what that is going to look like. I have parentheses squared, so be x, and what I have in here is going to be a positive b divided by 2. And then for my y's, I'm going to have that separately over here as y minus, and I'm going to have my b divided by 2. Actually, I'm going to change the color here. Change it to a dark blue. My b divided by 2 squared. Now it looks like I still have that 61 equal to 0. So the first thing I want to do is kind of identify my b value here. So my b value for my x is going to be 2. So my b divided by 2, so 2 divided by 2 is 1. And if I were to square that 1, I get 1 back. For my y values, I have my let's get my b value first. My b value is equal to a 16. So if I divide that by 2, 16 divided by 2 is 8. And if I were to square 8, 8 times 8 is 64. So now I kind of know more or less what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. So I have my x squared plus my 2x plus my y squared minus 16y plus 61 is equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 61 from both sides. So now I have my x squared plus 2x plus my y squared minus 16y is equal to a negative 61. Now I'm going to do the completing the square. So I'm going to have my x and my y kind of already figured out. So my b divided by 2 value is here. So I'm going to say plus 1. So that means the thing squared is also going to be 1. 1 squared is 1. Now over here, my b divided by 2 for my y value is 8, so I have a minus 8. And if I squared that, remember I had that positive 64. So now I'm going to have x plus 1 squared plus my y minus 8 squared. And now I'm going to add all those numbers together. Negative 61 plus 1 plus 64 gives me a positive 4. So now I have my circle written in standard form. X plus 1 squared plus y minus 8 squared is equal to 4. Now it says to find the center and the radius of the circle. Well, if I'm looking at that example above, remember I have my x plus 1 squared plus my y minus 8 squared equal to 4, where I have my h and k value and my radius squared value. So I'm going to say that my center is going to be -1, +8, so that's my h and my k value. And I'm also going to have my radius squared as 4, therefore my radius is equal to 2. So now for part C, it says to graph the circle. So I'm going to have my center at -1, +8, and my radius is 2. So I'm going to go up 2, I'm going to go down 2 from the center. From the center, I'm going to go right 2, and I'm also going to go left 2. So more or less, that's going to be my circle there. Okay. Now, in the examples below, now it says to write the equation of a circle given the graph. So here, what we're going to have to do first is find center. So we're smack center in here. So let's think about this. My smallest value here is 0, and my biggest value is 6. So if I have the center, it's going to be the halfway point between 0 and 6. So 0 plus 6 divided by 2. That would be my 6 divided by 2, which would give me 3. So I know that my center is going to be here at 3. And let's just make sure I went out on this in the same direction here. So this goes out to 3 from the center, and this goes out 3 from the center. So I definitely have my center point. So I'm going to have that my center is going to be 0, +3. And that my radius, well, I know that my radius goes out from the center to the edge 3. So my radius squared, 3 times 3 is 9. So I have my h value and I have my k value. So when I rewrite it, remember I have x minus h squared plus my y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. So here, I get to plug in my values. So I know that my h value is 0, and I know that my k value is a +3, and I know that my r squared value is 9. So really, I'm going to have x squared plus my y minus 3 squared is equal to a +9. Okay. All right. So now, let's look at number 12. If I'm looking at number 12, well, let's see the edges here. So my edges looks like it's +3 and +5. So right smack in the middle would be a +4. So I have +4, and it looks like my y value there would be a -3. And let's just really make sure. So from here to here, my radius is, well, I go from 4 to 4.5 to 5. So from 4 to 5, it's a radius of 1. Okay? So I have a radius of 1. And so now I can rewrite it. So of course, again, I have my x minus h squared plus my y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. So if I'm plugging in my values correctly, I'm going to get this as x minus 4 squared plus my y plus 3 squared is equal to 1. And that's going to be my final answer. for example number 5, it says write the standard form of the equation of a circle with the center that passes through this point. So you're just like, okay, well, I know that the general equation, hopefully you guys all have it memorized by now, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared, and I have my center of h and k. And here just passes through the point. Well, remember that any ordered pair, when you graph it, it's my x and my y value. So now plugging in some values, well, I have x minus, and that h value that I'm plugging in is a negative 7 squared, plus y minus, and that k value that I'm plugging in is 10 squared, is equal to my radius squared. So now I really have x plus 7 squared plus my y minus 16 squared is equal to my radius squared. So now let's plug in my x and y value. So the x value that I'm plugging in is a negative 7. And that y value that I'm plugging in is 7. So now negative 7 plus 7, well, that's just 0 squared. And here I'm going to have a 7 minus 16, which is a negative 9 squared, is equal to my radius squared. And while 0 times anything is just going to be 0, so negative 9 squared is going to be a positive 81. So my r squared is equal to 81. So now I can rewrite this. I know what my r squared value is going to be. And remember, it's that x minus h squared plus my y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. And I already have from above what my h and k value was because it already gave me my center, and I just figured out what my radius is. So I'm just going to plug in these values. So I'm going to have x plus 7 squared plus y minus 10 squared is equal to 81. So that ends up becoming my final answer. And again, we're going to try to write this circle in standard form. So this is where we're going to try doing that completing the square. So just over to the side, I'm going to be thinking about completing the square. And in general, that's when you have the x plus your b divided by 2 squared is equal to c plus your b divided by 2 squared value. Okay? So this is just something to kind of keep in the background as you're working these problems out. So it looks like I already grouped my x's and my y's together. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add 15 to both sides. So I'm going to have x squared plus 6x plus y squared plus 2y is equal to a positive 15. Now I'm going to look at this value over here. That's going to be my b value. So maybe I'll do it over to the side over here. So if I have my b is equal to 6, well, if I were to divide 6 by 2, I would get 3. Now if I were to square that 3, 3 times 3 is 9. So this is what I'm going to be using over here. So I have my x plus, and that b divided by 2 value is going to be 3. And so I have 3, if I square that, that's going to be a positive 9. Okay, now I'm going to deal with my y value. So here my b value is equal to 2. So if I divide that by 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. And if I square 1, 1 times 1 is just 1. So in here I'm going to have a positive 1. And if I square it, it's a positive 1 on the opposite side. So I really have x plus 3 squared plus my y plus 1 squared is equal to, and now I'm going to have my 15 plus 9 plus 1, and that's equal to a positive 25. So now I have written the circle in standard form. And I did that by helping myself out with completing the square. Okay. Now, the second part of section 12.1 is going to be parabolas. I know we've already dealt with parabolas before, but now we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So a parabola is a degree 2 polynomial, and here's the standard or general form, where we have ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So the graph of this type of parabola would either be facing upwards or downwards. So when it's facing upwards, that means it's going to be positive parabola. So it's positive. And sometimes I like to think of it as, oh, positive people are happy. It also looks like it's smiling at you. And if it's downwards, then it's going to be negative. And I like to think that negative people are sad, so it looks like it's frowning to me. Okay? And that variable a determines whether it's going to be facing upwards or downwards, depending on whether it's positive or negative. And the vertex we can obtain by using the formula negative b over 2a. That gives us our h value of the vertex. And k, we plug that h value into the original equation to figure out what that k value is going to be. The equation of a parabola may also be written in vertex form. This is a lot easier to graph. So here, if I were written it in vertex form, I know that the vertex is h and k. So this is what it's going to look like. And again, that a value tells you whether or not it's going to be positive, facing upwards, or if it's going to be negative, facing downwards. So in the first couple of examples, we just want to identify the vertex of the following equations. So for this first A problem, it looks like it's in standard form. So to get the h value of the vertex, I'm going to use the formula negative b over 2a, where I have that a is equal to negative 2, my b is equal to 12, and my c is equal to a negative 14. So I'm going to have my b value, which is 12, and I have my a value, which is negative 2. So now, if I plug this into my calculator, I have a negative 12 in my numerator, and 2 times negative 2, which gives me a negative 4 in the denominator. This turns out to be a positive 3. So now I know that I'm thinking about the vertex, and I have h comma k, that at least the h value is equal to 3. Now, to find the k value of the vertex, I plug 3 into my original equation. So here I have h is equal to 3. Or actually, let's do x is equal to 3. And I'm going to try to find my y value. So I have y is equal to a negative 2x squared plus 12x minus 14. So I'm plugging in 3 for x. So I'm just going to plug this into my calculator. So I have a negative 2 parentheses, positive 3 squared plus 12 times 3 minus a 14. And I get it to be a positive 4. So that tells me that my k value is going to give me a positive 4. So now, without a doubt, I can tell you that my vertex is going to be 3, 4. Okay. So that's how I identify the vertex when it's in standard form. Now, if I has it in vertex form, then this is perfect. I have my h and my k value, where h is 3 and k is -4. So then my vertex is going to be 3, -4. So it's a lot nicer when it's already given to you in vertex form. The vertex form, it's already given to you. Okay, so the next example, it tells us to graph the parabola finding the vertex. Well, okay, so I know I have my h and my k value. So I have that h is equal to -4 and my k value is equal to -1. So then my vertex is going to be -4, 1. So let's go ahead and do that. So -4, 1. Okay. So then from here, I need to think of some other values for my parabola. So let's think about this. I'm going to have my x and my y values that I get to plug in. And this is going to help me. So I have brought up my calculator to help me out. So we're going to plug in some values. So I don't know, let's see what happens when I plug in 0 for x. So here's my calculator. So it's parentheses 0 plus 4 squared plus 1. So I'm plugging 0 into my original equation. Let's see what we get from my y value. It looks like it's a positive 17. So that means 0 is really, really far away. My y value doesn't even make it onto my graph. So let's pick some values that are close to our vertex, -4. So let's be smart about this. How about I pick -3 and I also pick -5. That's just 1 over from the vertex. So that's going to tell us some information. So now let's try that again. So parentheses, my x value, which is -3, plus 4, square that, plus 1. That gives me a positive 2. Perfect. So that's what I'm going to put down, positive 2. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing, but now with -5. So my x value that I'm plugging in is a -5. And I said plus 4, square that, plus 1, and I get positive 2 as well. So now I can say that I have -3, positive 2, and -5, positive 2. So that's what my graph is going to look like, more or less. Okay. So now it's given to me in standard form. So now I just have to remember that the h coordinate of the vertex is found by -b over 2a. So in this case, let's see what we have. We have that a is equal to 2, b is equal to -4, and c is equal to -3. So when I plug in my formula, my b value is a -4, and my a value is a positive 2. So I have, as my fraction, I have a -4 over 2 times 2. So positive 4 over positive 4, that gives me a positive 1. So now I know that for my vertex, I have 1 for my h value. To figure out that k value, I just plug it into my formula. So I have my y is equal to 2x squared minus my 4x minus 3. And that value that I'm plugging in is 1. So I plug that into my calculator. I get 2 times 1 squared minus 4 times 1 minus 3. And that gives me a -5. So that is going to be my vertex. I have my vertex as a positive 1, negative 5. So then from here, I'm going to make a chart. Now I'm going to pick some x values that are relatively close to my vertex. Remember, my vertex was 1, negative 5. So maybe I'll pick 0, negative 1 to see how where my points are going to be. So I have 2 times, and that x value that I'm plugging in is 0, so that's a 0 there. I'm going to square it, minus 4 times my 0, and then I have minus 3. And that value is a negative 3. So now I have negative 3 as my value. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing with that other x value. That other x value looks like it's a negative 1. So 2 times negative 1 squared minus 4 times my negative 1 minus 3. Now I get positive 3 as my answer. So now I'm going to get a positive 3 here. So now I know that I have 0, negative 3. And I have negative 1, positive 3. Hold on. Just give me a second, guys. Okay, so where was I? Oh yeah, so negative 1, positive 3 is over here. So notice that I only did half of my parabola. If my vertex is here at this positive 1, negative 5 value, then I really should have picked something on the right-hand side. So maybe a good value to pick would have been positive 1, or even positive 2. So sometimes, these x values that you choose, you may need to get more to figure out what your trajectory is going to look like. So that's fine. I'm just going to do a little bit more. So I have 2 times positive 1 squared minus 4 times my positive 1 minus 3. And that gives me a negative 5. So I have positive 1 at negative 5. Oh, I already had that, didn't I? That was the same as here. So that makes sense. Okay. So now let's try 2. So 2 times 2 squared minus 4 times 2 minus 3. And that gives me a negative 3 value. Okay, so that's the one that's going to give us some value. So at positive 2, I have negative 3. Okay. So now I know more or less this is what my graph is going to look like. And, the hard thing about this is that you're choosing x values at random. So sometimes, you have to graph more. Sometimes, you do duplicate. I just realized that I did positive 1 twice, and that's okay. And you just keep doing it until it makes sense to you. All right. So now for part C, I like this because I already have my H and my K value. So I already know exactly what my center, or not my center, but my vertex is going to be. So I already know that my vertex is negative 2, positive 3. I also know because this A value is equal to negative 3, this is going to be a downward facing parabola. Okay, so maybe I want to pick some values here. So remember that I have my vertex at negative 2, positive 3. So maybe a good value to pick for my x values is a -1, and maybe a -3. And let's see what happens when we plug those values into my equation. So I'm going to have a -3 parentheses, and the value that I'm plugging in for x is -1. So -1 plus 2, square that, and it says plus 3. So remember, this is for my x value of -1, and I get 0. So I'm going to go ahead and put 0 on there. Now I'm going to do this again with the value of -3. So I have that -3 on the outside. The x value now is -3. And I still have plus 2. Square it, and a plus 3. And so that's going to give me a 0 as well. So now I can graph these points. So I have my vertex at a -2, +3, which is here. And I have my ordered pairs at -1, 0, and -3, 0. So my graph, more or less, looks something like this. So as long as you get the vertex and 2 other ordered pairs, you guys are going to be fine. Okay. So we have one more graph to graph, and this is in standard form again. So remember, the x coordinate of the vertex is given by -b over 2a. So let's plug in my b and a value accordingly. So I have my a value as -1, my b value is -4, and my c value is -5. So -b, my b value is -4, and my a value is a -1. So I'm going to have my fraction as a -4 being divided by 2 times a -1. So that's going to give me a -2. So my vertex, I have half of it. I have that my h value is a -2. To find the k value, I'm going to plug -2 into that equation. So I'm going to go ahead and do that using this calculator. So I'm going to plug -2 into my original equation. So negative, parentheses, that h, or that x value that I'm plugging in is -2. So I have to square that, minus 4 times my -2, minus 5. And that gives me a -1 for my k value. So this value is going to be -1. So again, I can come up with some values for my x and y to give me some ordered pairs. So I have -2, -1. So maybe on the right hand side of -2 is going to be -1, and on the left hand side would be -3. I'm going to try those values of x. So I'm going to plug those values into x into my original equation. So I have negative, and I have -1 squared minus 4 times -1 minus 5. And that gives me a -2. So I have -2 as my y value. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing, except now I'm going to be plugging in -3. Make sure you write it correctly. So minus 4 times my -1 minus 5. And I'm going to have a -13. Oh, notice how on my calculator I put in -1 instead of that -3. So So it's always good to make sense or to check your answer and be like, hey, what's going on? Why did I get something that's so off the chart for my y value? It's because I see that I did not input the same value. So it really should be negative 3 squared minus 4 parentheses negative 3 minus 5. Okay, so let me just triple make sure I made that right. So negative 3 squared minus 4 times negative 3 minus 5. Yep, I've input it correctly, and I get a negative 2. That makes more sense. So now I have my y value as a negative 2. Perfect. So I have my vertex. It's going to be negative 2, negative 1. So that's there. I know because my a value is negative, it's going to be a downward facing parabola. And the other points that I have is a negative 1, negative 2, and a negative 3, negative 2. So more or less my parabola looks like that. Okay, there is my parabola. Now, for example number 3, we have a word problem. It says find the equation of the parabolic arch formed in the foundation of the bridge shown. Write an equation in standard form assuming that the bottom left end of the arch is at the origin. Okay, so that's a very big hint. So it's saying that it's parabolic. So when I think about parabolic, I think about a parabola. So for the parabola, there's two equations. Either y is equal to ax squared. You know what? I'm going to write this not in black. Or not in red, but in black. So I have y is equal to your ax squared plus bx plus c. And your vertex form, which is y is equal to a x minus h squared plus k. Okay? So those are the two different formulas that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about parabola. And then it tells you something about the origin. So let's think about this. It says write the equation in standard form assuming that the bottom left end of the arch, so here's the bottom, and the left, here's this point right here. So this would be bottom left. This is bottom right. So the bottom left end of the arch is at the origin. So this origin is 0, 0. So there's 0, 0. It tells me that it has a height of 70. Okay. And that it also goes out 50 in So what that is telling me is that I have my graph. So my graph, it's going to be 50 this way, and it's also going to be 50 this way. So that would give me 100 over here. This is 0, 0, and I go, oh sorry, hold on, let's think about this for a minute. It says the entire distance from the edge to the very end of it is 50. So what's half of 50? 25. Let me draw that a little bit better. So here is my origin at 0, 0. I know I have this up at 70. and I know that I can go across from one end to the other at 50. So right smack in the middle of 50 would be 25. Half of 50 is 25. So that top of that arch would be here. And so my graph, you can think of it as going like this. So I can tell you what my vertex is going to be. My vertex is going to be 25, 70. Remember, it's my h and my k value. This is your x value. Here are your y values. So the next thing I need to figure out is my radius. Well, remember that your radius is from the center to the edge. So from the center to the edge, that would be 25. So the radius squared would be 625. So now my equation, since I have x minus h squared plus my y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. So I'm going to have x minus 25 squared plus my y minus 70 squared is equal to my 625. And so that's going to be my final answer. So that is the equation of the parabolic arch formed in the foundation of the bridge shown. So I just had to take that diagram and kind of put it onto my XY chart. And so remember, I drew it once and I was like, oh, I don't like the way I drew it. So then I drew it twice. And again, it's not that perfect, but if you need to keep redrawing it so that it makes sense to you, go ahead. But at least that second one, I think that I kind of get the hang of it. So I'm going to leave it there. So that is going to be your answer. So I guess that big hint there was really that the bottom left-hand side was going to be the origin at 0, 0. Okay. And so we also have the distance formula and the midpoint for chapter 12. So for the first example, it says to find the distance between the points -2, 3, and 4, -1. Well, I have my distance formula. I know that my distance is going to be the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus my y2 minus my y1 squared. So maybe I kind of made that too big, but that's okay. And so now I'm just going to plug in my values. So my distance is going to equal to the square root. So I have my x1, y1, and my x2, y2. So I have 4 minus -2 squared plus -1 minus 3 squared inside my square root. So that's going to equal, well, 4 minus -2, that's going to give me a positive 6, and -1 minus 3, it's going to give me a -4. So now I'm going to have 6 squared plus -4 squared, and that's going to give me 52. So the square root of 52 can be about 7.211. Okay. Now for the midpoint formula, I have the midpoint formula up there as well. It says that I have the ordered pair x, comma y, such that I have my x values added together, then divided by 2. And then the y values would be added together and then divided by 2. So I have my x values I'm going to add together, so negative 4 plus 8 divided by 2, and my y value 6 plus 1 divided by 2. So then my midpoint, well, if I have it in my calculator, negative 4 plus 8 divided by 2 gives me a positive 2. And I also have my calculator, 6 plus 1, and I divide that by 2, so 7/2. And so that ends up becoming my midpoint. Okay, guys, that is the end of chapter 12.1. If you guys have any questions, please email me. Also, the Math Success Center has online tutoring as well. And your homework, which is Newton, also has videos. So there's plenty of resources if you guys are stuck or confused or lost. You just got to reach out to somebody. Okay?